This is a very tough question. It's again the questions I'm just asked us to complete this, which from all this stuff, it's the phrase that leading up to this blank is obviously then a nation. So we're looking for some conclusion that's supported by this stuff, right? Obviously, it's the indication that from this stuff it should be obvious. It's quite obnoxious actually, because it's a very difficult question and it's not obvious at all what the answer choice is. But anyway, let's see what a noxious philosopher has to say. Nations are not literally persons. They have no thoughts or feelings. Right, okay? Yes, nations are not literally persons. Nations are nations. People are people. Nations have no thoughts or feelings, right? And literally speaking, they perform no actions. Sure. So thus, they have no moral rights or responsibility. Okay, so we're presuming that in order to have moral rights or responsibilities, we're presuming that in order to have moral rights or responsibilities, you must have, I don't know, like be a person, have thoughts, have feelings, perform actions, or something like that. But anyway, but no nation can survive unless many of its citizens attribute such rights and responsibility to the nation. So in order for a nation to survive, citizens must attribute something, all these things to the nation, which we know they don't actually have. But citizens must, for a nation to survive, citizens must attribute, I don't even know what, must attribute these things. Okay. And this four just tells us that this is the premise that supports this sub conclusion. But then, of course, we're making this the sub conclusion slash a major premise the support for this thing here. So this four is sort of not really even relevant. But you have to recognize this. Four is from our grammar lessons. We say how to break up the structure of the premise conclusion with for, since, because. So why should I believe this statement? Well, I should believe this statement because nothing else could prompt people to make sacrifices in national citizenship demands, blah, whatever. But anyway, so in order for nations to survive, many citizens have to attribute rights and responsibilities to nations. And we know that nations don't actually have rights or responsibilities. So obviously then, a nation cannot continue to exist unless what? Unless something other than the false belief that nation has moral rights motivates it. Well, why? It seems like in order for a nation to exist, that we need this false belief that nation has moral rights, because we know they don't. They're not literally persons. They have no moral rights. But we need people to assign them. So why this A seems to be sort of in the opposite direction of where we're going, unless something other than the false belief. But I think the false beliefs might be good enough. B says nations cannot survive unless many of citizens have some beliefs that are literally false. And there you go. Right. You just have to make sure that you understand that some belief refers to the belief that the citizens attribute such rights and responsibilities to a nation, which nations can't actually have, rights that are literally false. And that's it. So you just make these connections in the ideas that they want you to make, and that's how you get this question right. Nation can never be a target of moral praise or blame. Okay. I suppose this might be, you might think this is true because they did tell us here, nations have no moral rights. And you might presume if no moral rights, then you can't be praised or blamed for it. That's fine, but that doesn't complete this. You see, that doesn't logically complete this argument. Philosopher, you can make any number, given this premise, you can make any number of arguments out of it, and that's kind of what C does, right? C takes this and it's like, oh, I'm going to go in this direction now. But the philosopher is going in another direction. The philosopher talks more about this stuff and then, says obviously. So you have to follow the line of thought. This is not just a question where they're asking, take any statement above and then use it to support something. If that was a question stem, then C may well be right. D says a nation is not worth the sacrifice. Is it worth the sacrifices? That's totally, we don't know. The philosopher doesn't talk about what values, what's worth what sacrifices are worth what benefits. E says a nation should always be thought of in metaphorical terms rather than literal. And E's are sort of one of those panic answer choices. You're at the very end, you're like, I didn't like any of these. And yeah, okay, at this point you're ready to make E right. Psychologically, the LSAT test writers, they know this. That's why E always tends to be that sort of fluffy, kind of vague answer choice. Thought of it metaphorical rather than literal. And you're like, oh yeah, I did read something about them not being literal, so maybe metaphorical is right. But where does metaphorical come from? And again, similar to the mistake C makes, that's not where the philosopher's argument is going at all. But of course, it's a trap. It's a psychological trap. It's a very attractive answer choice. But hopefully you know why it's wrong now.